Does the word anchovies fill you with terror? It used to me, actually. I was very much opposed to having anchovies on pizzas or any kind of dish until I was taught this pasta by a friend of mine using anchovies, and the miracle that happens when you slow cook them in a bit of oil. But before we begin, I'm going to just remind you how to boil pasta. It's actually really simple, but there's something you need to keep in mind. Pasta needs to go into a pot of boiling water. In other words, there has to be a rolling boil, if you can see inside the pot over there. If it doesn't, if it's just warm, or if you start with cold water, the starches on the pasta will start releasing and the pasta will actually stick together rather than cook nicely and be loose. So this is what you want, a really aggressive boil. We're going to slowly add the pasta. You can add a really large pinch of salt to your cooking water, but don't add oil. It's not necessary. It's just a waste of lovely oil, actually. I'm going to give it a stir, just to make sure that until the water comes back to a boil, they haven't started sticking to each other. And as soon as you've got it back up to a boil, you can put the lid on, maybe askew, turn it down a little bit so you don't have any water boiling over, or just leave the pot open. In the meantime, I'm going to show you how to do the anchovy and tomato mix. We're going to have the pan on relatively low-medium heat, and I'm going to add an entire jar of preserved anchovies in olive oil to the pan. Now, first I'm going to take all the oil that was in there, because you don't want to waste it. It's if you buy the one in extra virgin olive oil, you can be sure it's very good oil they've used. And then we're going to just very carefully try and get all those little fishies out into the pan. Now, the trick here is definitely to keep your temperature low. If you don't, they fry and they stay in their original shape. What we're trying to do is get them to fry and disintegrate and almost turn into a paste. You'll see, it's really lovely and very delicious. And then all that happens, it imparts a very Moorish, salty flavor to whatever dish you're making. Once they've turned into a paste, we're going to add a whole bulb of garlic that has been finely chopped. That means the entire thing, peeled and chopped up, and some sliced baby tomatoes. Right, the pasta's going nice. I'm going to give it one last stir just to make sure they're not sticking together. And then we're going to just leave that for about 10 minutes or until they're cooked to your liking. I quite like it al dente, which means there's still a little bit of resistance when you bite into them, but that's totally up to you. Right, our anchovies are starting to sizzle a little bit. We want to make sure it's not too hot. If you're nervous about the amount of anchovies and you think you might not enjoy it as much, why not start with half a jar to begin with? You might have to add a bit of olive oil to your pan then if you can't use all of the oil from the jar. So at this stage you can see the anchovies have broken down quite substantially. It'll happen even more over the next sort of 10 minutes. What I'm going to do at this stage is just add the garlic so it can start cooking as well. There is a lot of garlic, so don't make this dish if you're expecting someone who doesn't like garlic, or if you have anywhere you need to be for an interview, for example. That might not be a good idea, but it is very Moorish and delicious. It's also a dish that's very good to add cooked greens like wilted kale or cavallonera. The black kale is very good with it. So at this point I might add a tiny bit more olive oil just so I can be sure the garlic actually has some oil to cook in as well. There you go. Preserved anchovies are very salty, so at this point we're not going to add any salt to the dish. When you've combined everything and you feel like it needs a little bit of salt, you can always add some then. At the moment, we're going to stick with what we've got. Right, I'm going to leave the garlic and the anchovies on the bottom, and I'm just going to add the halved tomatoes on top so the garlic can cook a little bit longer before being mixed in. Right, now at this point I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit because our pan is fuller now and can probably cope with it. And then as soon as we can smell the garlic cooking, I'm going to toss it, give it a good stir, and then leave the tomatoes to simmer and cook down for about 10 minutes. Once that's done, we're going to drain the pasta, toss it all together, add a little bit of salt if it needs, and that's it. Easy. Right, this looks really lovely. You could, at this point, add your wilted chopped greens or maybe even some baby leaf spinach like I'm going to do, and just stir that in. It wilts very quickly, so all you need to do is combine it with some hot ingredients and done. And we're going to just top our pasta with this. If you would like some, I really like freshly ground black pepper, so we're going to add that now. As much or as little as you fancy, and also actually a pinch of chili is really good in this dish. At this point I'm not going to wait for the spinach to wilt completely because I think it looks really nice, and it is actually quite lovely to eat it a little bit uncooked. We're just going to add some pasta to our bowl. Lovely, lovely Moorish anchovy sauce. Et voila, this is a very quick, cheap and tasty meal to make, and it will definitely impress your friends.